Hi, I'm Larry Mishler. Welcome back again. Today we're going to talk about artificial light and flash. And I'm not talking about the guy that's with DC Comics, but we're going to do this through Larry's lens. Okay, a lot of you guys like to take pictures, and you pick up your phone and you take pictures, and if you need extra light, all you have to do is go in and push the on button for the artificial light, and when you take a picture, it is just like that. How simple. Oh, it hasn't always been that way, and it really started off kind of rough. So let's go back to the late 1800s when, well, let's see, there wasn't even any electricity then, so this became a problem. If you wanted to create light, you had to do it by burning something. So what they did is they developed a thing called a flash powder. So if you wanted to take a picture and you didn't have enough light, you wanted to go inside, they developed a thing similar to this. Pardon my construction buddies, this is really a drywall tool, but it looks almost identical to the flash powder holders that they had. And so what they would do is you would go and you'd focus the camera, and you'd open the shutter, remove the lens cap, and go boom. Make the exposure, and then close the lens. And that was the way they did this. The only problem with is that anything that burns is kind of dangerous. So what they did is they had a lot of fatalities. They had a lot of bad things that happened. So around 1927, GE came up with the idea that they would take a regular light bulb that they were producing, they would wrap in a magnesium ribbon, and they filled it with that, and then it would go into a flash holder. They called this a GE Mazda flash bulb, or sometimes they call it the Edison base bulb. And it was really kind of neat because it would when the shutter was clicked, the bulb would go off and it would burn for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. It took that long. So that was a great deal. Now the reason this is blue, I'll explain a little bit later, because that has a very important part also. There was a guy by the name of Verkater in Germany, and what he did is he took a bulb very similar to GE's bulb, filled it with oxygen, and did that, and that worked pretty well. So between the two of them, and as things progressed, things got really pretty good. This is a number 40 press lamp, and this is pretty neat because this was filled with a whole series. Instead of a ribbon, it was filled with the wire of magnesium in there, and some of them had zirconium in there, so it made a bright light. One of the problems with flash photography was they were able to take the filaments in here and be very consistent. So the flash power, the amount of light, was pretty consistent. So, but then they had to figure out, well, how do you gauge exposure? Because every so much distance away requires more light. So they came up with a guide number system. Now, a guide number system was very difficult. And some of them, what they would do is you'd say, okay, this has a guide number of 100. So you could set the 100 in there and it would tell you what it is. Because a lot of photographers didn't want to sit down and focus the lens and then do the calculations. And the guide number is the f-stop times the distance. And that gives you the guide number. So for what that's worth. Anyway, so the Press 40 bulbs, these were the workhorse. And these came out in about just before 1920s. And they were especially used in cameras like this. And they would go into the flash holder like that. And that was a great deal. I'd flash you, but I don't have any batteries in here, so anyway. But it was kind of fun. And what they did is, okay, after the 40s, the Press 40s, they came up with a smaller one. And these little things here. This is a GE5 lamp or a Sylvania 25 lamp, and it's filled with the same kind of material inside to make a nice flash, except the base is smaller. Now, one of the problems is they're all along they're trying to get the most light out for the least amount of cost. They came out with the Press 25. GE called it their 5s. Sylvania called it the 25s. Now, the difference between Sylvania and GE were pretty much the same, except if you can see right here, there's a blue dot. Sylvania patented the blue dot. It was a little piece of something that they put in each lamp, so that if the lamp was bad, it would not be blue. And so you wouldn't waste your time trying to take a picture and you didn't know whether your batteries were dead or it was a bad bulb. So whenever the oxygen gets in here, if the bulb is not good, it will turn the kind of a white color. So the GE5 was really a neat bulb. Now, I said I'd explain the blue bulbs. With color film, with black and white, it doesn't make any difference. You could use a blue one or a white one, but most people would use a white one because you get more light out of it and there's no filter. The blue bulbs was for color film. And what it would do is it would take your daylight film, which was balanced for about 5,000 degree Kelvin, and this would add a blue cast to it so that it would equal daylight. They found that if you used a white flash bulb with daylight film, you'd get a real strange color cast. So that's the reason why they went to the blue bulbs. And naturally, they were more expensive. Okay, all of the flash bulbs, like these number 5s and 25s, this happens to be 25 blues. These were by Sylvania, and they have the blue dot, and Sylvania coined the term blue dots for sure shots, which is kind of neat. And that was one of the things that people would come in and into the camera shop and say, I need some flash bulbs. Well, what do you need? And most of them would either get 5s or 25s. They didn't care. But they said, oh, do you have those blue dot ones? So it really worked out well for Sylvania because they sold lots of bulbs that way. It was also a good thing because the blue dot, the number 5 flash bulbs were small enough. They sold them in things that looked like an egg crate. This is half a one. And you could buy them 6 at a time or a full dozen. And they were in kind of a little wrapper with corrugated paper. And I looked around and I tried to find some. As you can see, this is the same corrugated paper they used, and time has really deteriorated that. So it's very difficult to find any of the original egg crate cartons of flash bulbs. So, okay, this was very popular for a long, long time. And then they came out with the other size bulbs, an M2. And the M2 had a base, had a smaller base. If you can see the differences, it's a much smaller base. And people would come in and say, well, I need some flash bulbs. And you'd go to sell them these, and they say, no, I need the smaller one. And okay, so then they would get the M2s or M3s bulbs like this. And they were, as I said, manufacturing wants to make the same amount of light with the least amount of material and the lowest cost. So that's one of the reasons why they went to that, because it was expedient. Well, not only that, to confuse the things, later on they came out with an AG1 bulb. This is an AG1. Notice it has no base, it is all encompassing.
Right.
So this made, let me get one of these right here, and you can see the difference. It's even smaller. It's even smaller than the M2s. Plus, it was much easier to manufacture, and they could sell them for about the same thing as they did the other ones. Well, so this was a real challenge, because people would come in and say, I want some flash bulbs. And you'd say, okay, you want these? No, I don't think they're that big. How about these? No, maybe it's a little smaller. Oh, you want these? Oh, yeah, I think that's what I want. So it was really difficult to try and figure out if they didn't remember what they did. So along with the AG1s, they also came up with other things like the Flash Cube. This is the GE Flash Cube. This has 4 bulbs in it. And this was really easy. I think it cost more to manufacture, but they sold more of them, and they could get they could get the same amount of light out of them, and also they had a protector on it. Okay, the next thing they did too is on some cameras they made these, which would hold 10 lamps. And it's really funny because this is called a Sylvania Super 10, and it has 10 lamps in it, but most of the cameras that these went into only took 8 exposures. So either you wasted 2 or you had to remember that you had 2 more left on the next roll of film. Now these little things, this was bought at Skaggs Drugstore for $1.99. And that was a really inexpensive way to do it. But what they wanted to do is to get more people taking pictures inside, outside, and everything. So that's one of the things that they did. But they also, so they would, oh, where's my adapter? Oh, here it is, okay. So sometimes people had flash attachments that would use this, but they wanted to buy the cheaper bulbs. So they made a little adapter like so, and the adapter would fit in like that, and you could use the small M2 bulbs. Okay, so it's the same base as the number 520 or 25 bulb, but it accepts the M2s. So it was a pretty neat deal. And that's one of the reasons why we start having adapters, and we would tell people if they bought a camera or they bought a particular flash, you want to buy an adapter with that so that you can use all of the lamps. And that was a good idea. So, also with press cameras, I showed you the press camera before that took the large lamps. Well, they also made an adapter for it that would go in there, and you could use the, if I can get it in, there we go. you could use the number 5 flash bulbs. And that was a boon to the market. Also, they made another thing for on the commercial stuff. You could remove this. They could replace the large flash with another thing that fit right on top, and you didn't have to buy a new flash gun or anything. So it was just fine, and you could use the number 5 flash bulbs in there. Or if you had an adapter, you could use the little peanut ones, the AG ones. Okay. Now the little peanut ones came in a variety of little boxes. I mean, these were easy to carry around, and what they would do is they packaged them like this. That's a little AG1 blue lamp, and it was a very popular bulb. Now, if you wanted to do most people would take their pictures inside. Say from the camera to the subject would be maybe 8 to 10 feet, and the little bulbs were great for that, and they were would illuminate the picture just the way it should. If you wanted something bigger, and the people doing commercial stuff usually were using a larger camera and were taking pictures of a larger area, they'd use the bigger bulbs. Now, Polaroid, now we talked about Polaroid before, and we had the Polaroid camera, and they had a wink light. Now this, most of the film, regular roll film, was 100 maximum, maybe 400. Well, Polaroid, as I think I said before, had developed a 3,000 speed film. So with this, they just had a big battery in here and a little, this is called a wink light. Now, some of the people would go and they wouldn't buy the 3,000 film, and they would go to try to use this, and they'd say, well, my flash pictures don't come out, they're all dark. So Polaroid had another thing that fit on the wink light. If I can get it on there. Yeah, just like that. That would take the AG1 bulbs. And we'll put one in there. You got to have good dexterity to do this.
They're tiny.
They are tiny. Oh, I think this little thing here is broken. Okay, anyway, that was one of the ways that Polaroid solved this, so that if you were using the slower speed film, you could put on the flash attachment and still get good pictures. Okay, other camera companies came along and decided this is a good market. And what they did, oh, I've lost my flash. Okay, this is my little Ansco Ready flash. This is one of my first cameras. And what they would do is they built a flash that would clip right onto it. And Kodak did the same thing. They built flash units that would fit on their cameras. Kodak had a problem. And each time they made a new camera, they made a flash attachment. For instance, I went to sell a flash attachment to somebody that had a dual flex, and I went to sell them one like this, and they said, it won't fit my camera. It was one like, oh, come on. Oh, this. Now this was a Kodak dual flex flash holder, but it was for the early dual flexes, and it had this kind of a mount. So somebody at Kodak said, hey, wait a minute. We can save ourselves a lot of time, a lot of trouble, and the dealers a lot of pain if we take and make a standard mount for our cameras. So what they did is they put a double hole mount that has a screw on there, and it adapts then. And they made it for the Brownie Hawkeye, same mount, same flash, or they made several different flashes. This one takes it's a little smaller flash than this. This is a little larger reflector. But they made ones so that they could sell a flash and it would fit any of their cameras, except the old ones. And what they did then is they even got a little more elaborate. Now, one of the problems is that people had when you take a flash picture and you take the bulb out, it was hot, and so people would have to have them, and they'd eject them. But then you go to put another one in, it took a lot of time. So they came up with an idea. Kodak came up with an idea. I don't think it ever flew real well, but it did work for a while. And what they would do, they developed this little plastic sleeve that bulbs would go into. Then they developed the rotary flash gun. So you take a picture with one, and then you pull out and turn it to the next one, and you got a fresh bulb there. So you can do it very quickly. The only problem is that when you go to take these, it takes a little bit of time to load the lamps into the flash attachment. But people liked it, and it never did really fly. It never was the most popular, and people would say, well, it was a little more expensive, naturally, but that was one of the things that they did that tried to be innovative. Kodak liked to make cameras, they liked to make flash attachments. Somebody at Kodak said, hey, wait a minute. Let's put the flash in the camera. Make it all together. This is a Starmite 2. And what this is, it's the little 127 camera, and it uses the AG1 bulbs, and it has a built-in flash. And it also has a little safety feature here that you could load the picture and then put the little flash guard on to take a picture. Now, one of the problems that they had with flash bulbs is sometimes they would explode. And well, you know, that happens. And on the bottom of the box, let me read this to you. This is really kind of funny. I read this. Static electricity may ignite flash bulbs. I bet you didn't know that. I didn't either. Therefore, keep bulbs in this package until ready to use. If lacquer coating is damaged, bulbs may shatter when flashed. Therefore, always use a shield over the reflector. Never flash in explosive atmosphere. Yeah, I think that's probably good advice. I have to tell you a story. We were at a wedding. My dad and I were at a wedding, and we were shooting this wedding, and it was in the kind of a rough neighborhood down where there's a lot of, violence and things. So but we went anywhere to take a wedding. We had a very large group, and so my dad had a number 2A bulb, which is like this, but they had been rolling around in the gadget bag for, quite a long time, because we rarely use those bulbs. But it was such a large group, and he said, get me one of those big bulbs. So I got one, and he plugged it in, got ready to take the picture, and when he flashed the picture, the bulb exploded, and it actually didn't have any plastic around this side, so it exploded and the whole thing just went forward. All the people in the wedding party ducked, hit the ground. and then they realized what had happened, and that was the laugh of the night. That you gonna shoot us again? So anyway, that was a lot of fun. But there is a hazard with flash bulbs if you get the lacquer coating that has a defect in it. Okay, I've talked about flashes and how they adapt them and how Kodak made theirs and so forth and how they made some of the cameras. But commercially, photographers for a long time have wanted to have flash attachments that they don't necessarily belong to a certain camera. So there had to be some things that they did that were common to the market. Let me grab this camera here again. This flash attachment here was made so that it had a quick release, so you could take it off the camera. Now, what it did, instead of making contact through the camera itself, there was a cord. And it has a sync cord that synchronizes the flash unit. If I can get it in there. Come on. You can do it. Oh, there we go. Okay. What it has is a sync cord that goes from the flash unit and goes to the camera. I'm going to set this down here, and it plugs in right here. And that way you can take the flash unit off if you want to direct the light in a different way. You can do that. And it's that was a good technique. Now, what happened when photographers they would go and instead of using the 4x5 camera, a lot of press photographers went to the Rolleiflex or the twin lens reflex. Well, what they did, they still had their old flash units. So what they did is they made the same bracket here and made a base so that they could hook up their Rolleiflex camera to this. Then all they did was to take their same flash unit that they had, that attached there, this attached to it's a PC connector. Now that doesn't mean politically correct. That was a potential connector, and that's what they called it. Anyway, this way they could still use their smaller camera with their large light and get good pictures with it. But there was brackets. I'll have to show you. The twin lens reflex pretty much took over photojournalism, and with this kind of a setup, it was much lighter to carry. It had a nice grip, nice feel there, and you could do a lot of sports photography with it. And it was a boon to sports photography and commercial photography as it was, because it was smaller. The film actually improved. It was a smaller camera. It weighed less. It was easier to carry around when you're carrying it around all day. You didn't have to load film holders because you could get 12 exposures on a roll. So that was the same as 6 film holders, and it became very popular. With the Super 10, it was used on the Kodak Pleaser and a lot of other cameras, but it would fit right in there so that it would make it so you didn't have to change bulbs. You just take that, and when you do you're finished with all 5, you flip it over and do the other 5. Now, there was also a flash bar. Now this is the Sylvania flash bar, and this is used by one of the other cameras, like the Polaroids. One of the Polaroids used this. This is a 1-step Polaroid. And all the SX70s, I think, were able to use this kind of a flash thing. And what it would do is you plug it in the top like that, take your picture, and when you do 5 of those, then you turn them around and you do the other 5. The thing that's always wondered is that the Polaroid camera, I think they took 8 pictures. So they had 10 bulbs. But, I guess you had to use the next 2 on the next roll of film. Anyway, that was how these little units were used in the camera manufacturing. And it was pretty good because you could take one picture, another picture quite quickly, and you didn't have to change bulbs. We'll be right back. Everybody has one of these, but before these, we had box cameras that had film. It's a little 10X. I tell you what, next time we do this, if you could stay awake instead of snoring, that would be great. One of the things in the commercial end that when you buy a lens, they were usually fairly expensive. One of the things that they did was they had a lever here that you could turn to X or M. Okay, this is the switch here, M and X and M. And the reason for that is that X was for electronic flash and M is for medium peak bulbs. And the reason for this is that when you take a picture with a flash bulb, it takes a few milliseconds for the thing to reach complete power. If you hit the shutter and it sets it off immediately, the shutter may close before the bulb has actually peaked its thing. So what it actually does when you go to take the picture, as the shutter rotates around, it starts the bulb burning before, and so everything synchronizes. So that's one of the things they did commercially. And all modern lenses usually have an M and an X. Now, when I say modern lenses, I'm talking about modern film lenses, because today, if you were to buy a lens that had a sync shutter, or a camera that had a sync shutter, chances are it wouldn't have an M and an X, because flash bulbs aren't used anymore, or very seldom. There was some issues about safety with flashes, so they developed all kinds of things. For the large flash attachments, they developed these little plastic bags that would fit over there, and so if the bulb exploded, it wouldn't hurt anybody. And they made several of these little things that would go on the flash adapters. These flash things, it would fit over here so that it would be safety features. They sold these for, well, this one sold for 65 cents. Now it'd probably be $5. Okay, they also made a lot of these little baggies for, they also made the little baggies. This is called a two-way. And on one side it's clear, and the other side it's frosted, so you could have a little diffuse light if you wanted to have not quite as harsh a flash picture. Well, somebody got really wise and said, two-way, make it three-way. So they invented this thing, and so it's clear on one side, it's frosted on the other, and lo and behold, they have a blue side. So you can use clear flash bulbs, the cheaper bulbs, and still have a good color balance by and also maintaining safety in case the bulb explodes. So that was kind of a neat thing. These sold for $1. So they were a little bit more, but you'd save all that money in buying white bulbs instead of blue bulbs. In the meantime, many other companies, foreign and national, got into the market. The idea was to make things cheap, small, and workable. So this is one made by Zeiss Icon, and this was a very popular one. And what it was made so that you could easily carry it in your pocket, unwind the sync cord, open up the little reflector, and attach it to your camera and plug it in. And it used it had an adapter so that you could use the larger bulbs, like the number 5s, like this, or you could use the adapter with it and use the smaller lamps. The smaller lamps. Where's the smaller? There's the smaller lamp. Like that. So this was a very popular thing, and they were inexpensive too. This was about, I think, $10 at the time.
When
$9.95. This was around 1955, 56 year, and that was the time that they were doing that. Everybody wanted to get into the market, and some people made really inexpensive ones, like this is a Universal, made by Universal Camera Company. As you can see, it's really simple, and this goes, let's see, you have to assemble it yourself. There. This goes fits on the top of your camera, and it is a really kind of a neat little thing. It's easy to put the batteries in, and it was a relatively inexpensive. This was like $4.95, and this is about the same era. This came out in about 1950. But there are other people like Agfa. Now this is a neat one. I always carried one of these with me because it's called a Thule, or the tulip, and it goes like that. It uses the AG1 bulbs, and was kind of an amazing little flash. It also had the flash sync cord, the PC cord, was wrapped around here so that it was easy to put away and easy to store, and had this neat little case that also had a little belt loop that you could put on your belt. But the little Thule flash from Agfa was very popular, and I sold a million of these little things. They were not too expensive. But all kinds of people would come out with different kinds of things. This is one that's made by Highland, and it has a cord and the collapsible thing. But still, this was a much cleaner design. However, it did have the facility where you could do tilt flash and that kind of thing without removing it from your camera. Polaroid, again, they made flashes, and they used as a safety thing, they put a plastic cover over the front so that it wouldn't remove. So if you had a problem with the flash bulb, it wasn't going to be on their legal team. But there's a million different kinds of flashes. People made them small. This is Ansco Light. This uses the AG1 bulbs and has an adapter. Now some of them have, this will either do on a sink, a hot shoe, or just a regular with the cord plugged in here. But they're very small, and they were really very popular, and people could start taking pictures. Here's one made by Canon, and this is very similar to the design of this, but you would load your own bulbs in here, close the door, put it on your camera, and it would shoot. And they had a circuit in here. When the M bulbs went off, they would short. So it would also go to the next one, and it would the next one, the next one. So they had a triggering circuit in there. It was really kind of ingenious. This was also a very popular one. Okay, I mentioned electronic flash. So let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to about 1932. There was a guy by the name of Dr. Harold Egerton who was working at MIT. And he was an amazing guy, and he figured out how he could take a high voltage supply and run it into a gas-filled bulb, and it would flash, and it would happen many times. So he didn't have to, it wasn't like a flash bulb, but once it was burned, it was done. This was, and it was something filled with the argon gas or something, some kind of gas that was filled with a tube that would do that. Well, there's another group that was in the same town, Highland Research Development. And they were really interested in Egerton's idea of developing an electronic flash. And so they developed a triggering system so that you could use it with a shutter on a camera. Well, Egerton and them, they worked on that quite a bit before. But what they did is Honeywell, somebody at Honeywell got together, and they decided to merge with Highland. And Highland Honeywell became a force to reckon with, and they did all kinds of electronic flashes. In fact, I believe to this date they've made over 60 different electronic flashes, and really have contributed to the market much more than a lot of people. Okay, Honeywell, as I said, made probably over 60 different electronic flash units. They were really into the market. They really wanted to make it a good thing. One of the things that they did, electronic flash still had the same problems that flash bulbs had, except you didn't have to throw the bulb away. But you still had to figure out what the guide number was, how much, what the exposure was, and so forth. Honeywell came up with a thing. And this is a Honeywell strobonar. And if you look right here, it has a little electric eye. what that did is they were able to take the light coming, they were measuring the light coming back from the flash, and since it had a duration, they could figure out how long it took to make that light, and they could cut it off. So if you were real close, the duration of the flash would be shorter, or if you were farther back, the duration of the flash would be longer. This was a boon to the market, and this was pure luxury, because what you could do is you could set your f-stop and start shooting. If you went closer or farther away, you wouldn't have to reset your aperture. It was a boon to the electronic flash market. It was a boon to the journalism market, because people that were in the journalism field loved this thing. I think I wore 3 of them out, and they weren't cheap, but they were a lot better than anything else we'd ever had. So that was the big boon to the market. So with that, other people use their circuitry, and I don't know why they didn't patent it, but I guess they couldn't for some reason or other. Anyway, this is a little Vivitar. This thing, I think this was about $150 for a flash. One of the things they did have, and it was good for about 80 pictures, but they also, you could buy another battery pack. You could charge that up and use it. You could either use NiCad batteries like this, or you could use regular D cells. But on a NiCad battery pack, it would shoot about 80 pictures. If you were out on a big assignment and you ran out of battery, you just pop this out, pop the other one in, and you were ready to go for another 80 pictures. Okay, this was Vivitars. These little units were like $69. Minolta made one, and as you can see, they're starting to get really small and really powerful. This is one that was made by Regular. This was this is one of the first ones that came out after Honeywell had built theirs, and you could use this with either a hot shoe or with a cord. Now, when I say hot shoe, a lot of the camera manufacturers, this is a Nikon N90. This was the one of the last film cameras that they made, at least before they started making digital. And if you look on the top here, there's a thing called a hot shoe. And about this time, ISO, instead of ASA, it changed to ISO. Often wondered about that. And what happened, we had the American Standards Association was ASA. That's how they rated film, and that's how they rated most of the photographic equipment. When they changed it to International Standards Organization, they came up with things like the hot shoe, and they were all standards so that electronic flashes could be made simpler. You could either use it with a cord or without, or you could plug it in the top without the cord, and it made a really big difference. So then everybody started using the hot shoe, but most of them, in case you didn't have a hot shoe on your camera, would go ahead and make a cord that would sync it, the sync cord. Here's one made by Rolly. This is made by Rolleiflex, and it worked better on 35 millimeter cameras than it did actually work on the Rolleiflex, because it was, if you remember the Rolleiflex, it needed to have a bracket on the side because there was no hot shoe on the camera. But it was a neat little flash, and this one I think still works. But several others, like this is a Nissan. electronic flash, and they started making them for specific cameras. Like this was made for some of the little pocket cameras or the cartridge cameras that Kodak came out with later. Along with electronic flash, and people had to have some kind of a way to fix the flash to the camera, and they weren't always the same. So they made adapters, and I have a couple of adapters. Guess where they make their money? Okay, this is adapter for a Rolly or a twin lens reflex, and there's several other adapters here, and each time you had a different camera that didn't have an adapter, you would buy one that, say like this, that would fit. But they sold these adapters. We sold a ton of adapters, and there was always a different system. And I'm kind of glad that they've kind of settled on the hot shoe with that. But anyway, this is a bunch of adapters. The electronic flash used high voltage because as Dr. Egerton's experiments were taking high voltage through a gas-filled tube, and it was great because you didn't have to buy flash bulbs. And the recycle time on some of these flashes was very short, so you could really do some neat stuff. One of the things that I had, this is an old Jet 2, and I use this to shoot weddings. Now, one of the problems is that on some of these, I had a battery pack that was about, the battery pack was about 1 foot by 6 inches, and it was heavy, but I could get lots of flashes out of it. But the cords were a problem. And one night I was shooting a wedding, and the cord frayed. Well, unbeknownst to me, I had the press camera and I had the flash, and I had everybody there, and the best man happened to be a guy that was he was probably the worst man, because everybody kind of, he was loud, boisterous, and he probably had a little too much to drink. And anyway, he was standing next to me, and he was telling everybody what to do. Hey, look over here, don't look at him, look at me, like that. So anyway, I got there and I went to take the picture, and my hand shorted on the wire. And I went this way, and with the flash, I knocked the best man out. I hit him on the head, and he fell to the ground. And the room was silent. And then everybody cheered. So that's the first time I got cheered for taking a picture at a wedding. But it was a thing that made me, be sure that the sync cords and everything that you have on electronic flash are in good repair, because if they aren't, I also got a really bad burn on my hand, and it smelled terrible, and it took me several weeks to heal. But the wedding couple said, "Hey, thanks for the hot shot." And so that was my electronic flash story of that. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this, and next time we're going to be talking about how photography developed for the families, and how the commercial market actually was developed so that people would love to take pictures, and so that inexpensive cameras did a really good job, and they helped propel the market to where it is now. So until next time, it's Through Larry's Lens. This little camera here, I bought. I went into this guy's camera shop, and he wasn't doing very well, and it was a used camera. Anyway, I looked at that camera and I said, wow, that's a nice Rolly, and it was clean. And I said, what do you want for it? And he said, I'd have to have 90 bucks for it. And I said, oh, I think I can swing that. So I wrote him a check for $90 and took the camera home.